everybody. My name is Pete Kovacic. I am a region sales manager for Bristol Light Daylighting Systems. And Bristol Light partners up with Wasmer on projects where we try to introduce some daylighting. We're going to talk a little bit about how daylighting can help in the manufacturing process in a couple different ways. So we'll start out. Testing. All right, here we go. So why daylight, right? You know, our eyes for the past 100,000 years, if we look at the Homo sapiens species, right, of which we're part of, so for the past 100,000 years, our eyes have really become these finely honed machines that allow us to do what we need to do on a daily basis. And it's really just since the late 1800s that we started using artificial light to really help us do our jobs on a daily basis. And so anytime we can introduce natural daylight, our eyes work the best that they can work, and to really help not only from a productivity standpoint, but really from an overall happiness standpoint. We always want to introduce natural light, and they've been doing it even with architecture in the early, this is the Parthenon from 600 AD. They were using indirect natural light to get light into a building. We don't want to rely on electricity in order to light space. Talking about sustainability and energy savings, electric rates going up 13% in the next couple of years potentially, right? And I think that's a conservative estimate. How about if we just reduce the amount of electricity we need to do our jobs more effectively? I think we could get a lot of people to start to buy in on that. So let's talk about harvesting daylight. By utilizing overhead indirect lighting in a manufacturing facility, the Department of Energy has shown that we've reduced energy consumption of that plant by between 35 and 70%. Now, granted, in your facilities producing glass bottles, there's an energy cost beyond lighting. There are some places, if we're in a sorting facility or whatever, the majority of electricity that's being used either runs the conveyor or runs overhead lights. We can see a higher percent increase or a decrease in the electric bill based on lighting. The other thing that I really want to, target is increased productivity. Hirschhorn Mahone they're a efficiency company, did a research study, and it spanned about 6 years. They saw reduced absenteeism, better short-term memory recall, and a higher level of concentration in buildings that had natural light. Lockheed Martin started doing that in their facility in Sunnyvale, California, and because of the increase in productivity and reduced absenteeism, they implemented a natural daylighting initiative throughout all their facilities throughout the U.S. It really makes a huge difference from an employee morale standpoint. When I think back to Dave's slides in the beginning and what Tim has been talking about in his presentations, if we want to retain employees and you want to get after some of the millennials, but you ultimately want to keep the best employees that you can find, natural daylighting helps do that, and at the same time puts money to the bottom line. I get this question all the time when I'm working with architects to daylight a facility. If I put more holes in the roof, my energy consumption is going to go sky high. I'm putting holes in a really well insulated space. Not true, because we could reduce the amount of overall electrical demand with overhead lighting. So even in a northern climate like Burlington, Vermont, or in a southern climate like Phoenix where you have more cooling capacity, the net decrease is really driven by lower electrical demand because we've reduced the need for some overhead lighting. So when you get into your facilities that you have, by throwing some indirect light overhead, we could really do a lot to increase worker productivity, make things easier to see, spot defects possibly on the line, spot leaks in an air hose. Whatever it is, it becomes a safer working environment, and really the net cost to you continue to decrease. Yes?
So the comparison of the lighting, is it, older technology, standard lighting, as opposed to a newer efficient, high efficiency lighting? What's used when you're doing these comparisons? Are you taking an old facility with crappy lighting and saying, yeah, take it out, put a skylight in? Or are you saying, in comparison, if I'm looking at putting lighting in this location, do I put the most efficient?
Yeah, good question. So we actually do it a couple different ways. And I'm going to get to the tools that we use. So what we would do in your facility is take a look at exactly what you have now and what the changes would be if you kept your light the same, or if we incorporated new higher efficiency fixtures, what would that do as well? And it's ultimately, we want to turn a dark facility into this. No overhead lighting. All the light that you see up in the ceiling is daylight coming into that facility. It's unbelievable when you see this retrofit use 238 skylights. And for the most part, between 9 and 5, this is in California, between 9 and 5, they don't have to run overhead lights about 75% of the year. They get enough natural daylight. Now it's on an optical eye, so anytime their foot candles drop to where they can't do their job effectively, it brings up some lighting so they can do their job. But the thing that I will point out, if you want to talk about visual acuity, right? Natural daylight can reproduce these red rollers. It's a true red. You couldn't get that in an artificial light setting. It makes it easier. In this, they're actually making campers. So they're looking at a tape measure to make sure they're cutting boards and metal to the right length. A little bit different than what you guys would have, but the same concept, right? You want to be able to increase worker safety, increase employee satisfaction, and lower your electric rates, reduce your carbon footprint, make yourself the most attractive as one of the vendors in the supply chain, going to some of the major retailers and going to a company like Budweiser. And really, by taking what your fixed costs were, somebody threw out a figure of $80 million in electricity a year. Is that right? Did I hear that right? Energy, okay. Energy, $80 million. If you could reduce a portion of what you spend to light any of your plants, that money, you've already budgeted 80. When somebody's putting together their financial analysis, if $1 million of that can be saved, where does that go? The bottom line. We've been under, and I'm sure you guys have been under the same thing. We go on, every year we evaluate every process looking to where we can save. Because we're trying to not increase our prices because the market is demanding we hold our price even though our materials have gone up. Sound familiar? So when you start to get into a situation like that, if all of a sudden you can find $1 million someplace and that drops to your bottom line, pretty soon you're going to say it, you're going to be as efficient as you can be with workflow. Maybe some technology will come around that'll change things a little bit. But we want, this slide didn't turn out right.
I'll take that blame for that. We took the transitions out, so I apologize.
All right, so what I was trying to show here is that we actually put a lot of science behind laying out your plants to save money. And sometimes it's a matter of coming up with thermal imaging to see where we're saving. Sometimes it's putting out a line drawing, an isolane drawing that shows foot candles on the floor. We're doing a library project right now. We just put together some, what we call a sky calc. I guess this chart would show you foot candles every month, every hour. We would also show you your savings on an annual basis with that. And really, this is where, to your question, what kind of light fixtures are we using? You tell us what you've got, and we'll show you what's going to be put in, and we'll show you what it's going to be like with a skylight overhead, providing indirect lighting. The thing to take away, the plant that I was showing you back here, they saved $70,000 a year once they went to overhead skylights. $70,000 a year. Well, we did our analysis before they made the commitment to put those skylights in. We showed them a $62,000 savings per year. We've exceeded, we were very conservative on what the numbers would look like. Their return on investment on that plant was 2.4 years. 2.4 years to get their money back to put those skylights in. So every month after 2.4 years, guess what? That money is going right to their bottom line. $70,000 a year.
2.4 years without subsidies of any kind?
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and all we did is we took the cost of our product and the install on that. Yep. And then that all dropped down to the bottom line. So it's very effective. One of the things that they found in this particular plant is everything is so exact. You know, when they're going and they're cutting pieces, we laid everything out in what we call concentric circles, you know, because you want to always have that natural daylight overlap, otherwise you get some shadows. And so we laid it all out that, in one of the other presentations I do, I actually show some people working inside a trailer. And the roof still hasn't been put on the trailer, and you can see there are no shadows with them working inside there under natural daylight. And that's sometimes pretty tough to achieve, but with the right plan, knowing how many feet we have from the floor that the daylighting will rest at, we want to know what the wall color is. All that gets factored into our modeling. Yes, Tim.
Does that facility benefit by any color quality, you know, as far as clients' specifications of the color rendering index, as far as client sample light levels compared to?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the color rendering index really, you're at 100 with the natural daylight. We were showing you the red rollers, but when they have clients walk through there and you see the decals on the side of the trailer or what the interior finishes look like under the natural light, they get a true representation of what they're going to see. Before in artificial light, they always had to pull the trailer outside to see true color. Now as they take tours, they can see that. Good question, thank you. Yes?
Well, how do you achieve the same? You're going to put skylights in, but daylight varies during the time of year, time of day, weather conditions. Does the lighting vary here in conjunction with it?
Yeah, so oftentimes, like for example, in this plant, because there are optical sensors up by the skylight and they monitor that level. So it'll bring the lights up and down at a variable level. So that way they always have consistent light. Well, one of the charts that we provide shows you month by month, hour by hour. And so it'll be labeled January through December down the x-axis, and on the y-axis, it's 1 through 24. And so we're looking at every hour of the day. We plug in the geographic location, so that way we know the path the sun will travel in that geography. So we'll get a different, if we do your plant in Winchester versus a plant in Burlington, you'll get different numbers because the sun is out at a different amount per day because of its geographic location, and most likely their electric rates are different as well. And so we factor all that in based on location. And we'll tell you the amount of foot candles that you would typically see. I can't give an exact amount because I don't know how many cloudy days we're going to have, but I can give you a pretty good estimate. per month what you're gonna see per hour. Well, there's some pretty complex software out there now that really does a great job of calculating that based on skylight to floor ratio, because that's really what we concentrate on, right? At some point, that curve really starts to drop off. If I put too many holes in the ceiling, I can't put more light into that facility, or I can't shut the lights off more than they're shut off. When they're off, right? Even if we're on a variable system, there's still a point where the light switch is off and there's no electricity running to the fixtures. So if I have an 8% skylight to floor ratio, you're going to start to see we start to get on the wrong side of the savings curve.
We run blue glass out in Ardagh. Well, when I was out there, one of the guys told me to do that, take the bottle and carry it outside the plant to see exactly what color they're producing, because when they pulled in, the lighting was so poor that they couldn't tell if they had the right color glass or not. That's something we're gonna get a call out there to see if we can put a different type of light in.
It really, in a place like that, natural daylight would really help. Now, not to say that they still wouldn't pull a bottle out to double check it, in a controlled environment where they know their lighting is always exactly the same. We used to do that with paint samples all the time. We set it in a little box. We knew everything was set up exactly the way it should be.
And I think we use a color spectrophotometer for that now. Eyeballs was done 20 years ago.
They also have light boxes.
Yeah.
Who goes on the roof up there? You go on the roof?
Do I go on the?
No, do they go on the roof of that facility?
Sure.
Okay, so these lenses, whatever they are OSHA approved, fall resistant. Two guys could fall on it, they won't go through, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. So even OSHA doesn't. OSHA's got guidelines, but the guidelines are not only vague, but I would say that they're probably not sufficient. I'll put it that way. So every lens that we manufacture meets OSHA fall guidelines. OSHA's fall guidelines, just so you know, it has to hold 200 pounds. Now, if you try to get a clarification on what 200 pounds really means, even they don't know. So ours will hold a minimum of 400, but we've got our polycarbonate 1600, but we also sell a safety cage that's an exterior cage that you can put over there. So even if you've got a 200-pound man up on the roof and he loses his balance and he's got a tool belt with him and he falls on that, you know, what's the impact on that with a 200-pound person falling into that skylight? It's not 200 pounds. So that's why we've got a 400-pound dome, but really putting a safety cage to the outside or doing a security screen on the top of the curb on the inside really makes more sense in a manufacturing facility, because the last thing you want to have happen is 10 years down the road, somebody loses their balance or backs up and falls into that and falls backwards and can't catch themselves and have them go through. There are about 7 deaths a year like that.
So was that factored into the 2.4-year payback?
It was. Absolutely.
What's the life of those lenses?
Depends on which one you go with, but I will tell you anywhere from 20 to 30 years. I don't know of anybody who gets up on the roof to clean them. They let the rain take care of them.
Part of California.
That is up near Bakersfield, so central California, between San Francisco and LA. Yes?
What's the production schedule of the facility?
This production facility, they run 2 shifts. So they've got a shift that runs from like 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then they've got a shift that's from 4 to midnight. And then they shut down for 3rd shift.
5 days?
Depends on demand, because they do sometimes work 6.
And a big variable in daylight savings is because think about, you remember me talking about the curve before, the bell curve? Obviously, when there's the most amount of demand being needed, your energy costs are the highest.
why they like it is weird to
Right,
me.
that's
It's a
right.
governmental confusion.
They like it
I
because
get what
they
you're
want
saying.
money
They
next
do,
year.
because part of it is, you're bringing in skilled labor. And their belief is that if you can mobilize once with skilled labor, get multiple things done, there's some savings to the project. There is the marketing to be able to say that they've done more. There is, if you get really creative, creativity is key. Because if you use the right control system to shut the electronic lights off, and we talked about before data logging, you want to have a baseline. You want to have what were you consuming the electricity before, what are you consuming the electricity now, so you can improve the savings are crucial. Now you can piggyback into, what is that one down in ComEd where it's the largest one we're doing right now? Is it called intelligent lighting or something, smart lighting, whatever, whatever that's called. Because now you have additional IOs. The IOs would be just an analog input or a relay. You have additional things in these control systems to be able to do other stuff, like reporting out to employees, and there's all these little hidden bonuses for the building owner to take advantage of that stuff. Yes.
But when you go in and install these skylights and existing factors, what precautions do you take to protect what's underneath the debris that might fall from what's all over the roof?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it really is going to depend on where the skylights are being placed as to the type of precautions that get placed. Because often there's a netting that goes over that, so when they go to place those, if it's right over a manufacturing line, we try to coordinate with a planned shutdown and get the skylights installed during that period of time. But oftentimes when it comes time to cut holes in a roof, there are plenty of ways that we can catch debris and divert that. The install crew will do that to not shut you down while you do that. A large install though, like for example in this particular plant, they worked in sections and got that done over the course of about 3 weeks' time. And they were able to do that with no disruption to their workflow. I can't say that we have that in every location because that's not always the case. But we have to take a look at where they're going in. A lot of times when they're going over walkways and things like that, we could divert any of the debris that would come down until we get the curb placed. Once the curb's placed, you won't see anything else come through that. It's just that initial cut. Any other questions for me? I know I'm kind of bumping up against my time here. The one last thing that I'll leave you with, and I think Tim really has done a good job of bringing this thing home. Anytime we put these in, and we're talking about like savings in this plant of about $70,000 a year, right? Anytime we do that, we are measuring that. You know, we're going to measure the foot candles on the work surface to make sure we're delivering what we said we could deliver, and then we're measuring the energy savings. Because it's really important. I think, you know, again, when we're talking about employee buy-in, if people realize that this money ultimately is affecting the bottom line, whether you have profit sharing or not, people know when the company makes more money, they can invest that back into their employees or invest into new business opportunities, et cetera, which means more for them. So it's really important to kind of track that and let people know that this is really going to benefit them. I'll be around for quite a while, so if like at lunch, if you guys have any questions about daylighting or some of the products that we have, because I didn't want to get into any product knowledge, but we've got a deep portfolio of products, whether it's smoke hatches, skylights, slope glazing, etc. There are a lot of things that we do in the plant. So thanks for the time.